The studio lights blazed down on the polished wooden floor of the martial arts demonstration hall in Los Angeles, 1964. Bruce Lee stood at the center, his lean frame barely reaching 5 feet 7 inches, wearing his signature black kung fu pants and nothing else. His muscles rippled like coiled steel cables under his skin. Across from him towered Carl the Mountain Morrison, a 7-foot, 285-pound former heavyweight boxer who had never lost a street fight in his entire life. His shadow practically swallowed Bruce whole. Morrison cracked his massive knuckles, each pop echoing through the silent hall like gunshots. "They say you're fast, little man," he growled, his voice deep as thunder. "But speed don't mean nothing when you're fighting a mountain." The crowd of martial arts masters, Hollywood producers, and skeptical journalists leaned forward in their seats. This wasn't supposed to be a real fight, just a demonstration. But Morrison had other plans. "In China we have a saying," Bruce replied calmly, his eyes never leaving the giant's face. "The bigger they are, the harder they." He paused, a slight smile crossing his lips. "Well, you'll see." What happened in the next 7 seconds would become legendary. But nobody expected it to start with complete humiliation. Before we continue, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss stories like this. The background: East meets West skepticism. It was 1964, and America didn't know what to make of Bruce Lee yet. The 23-year-old martial artist had arrived from Hong Kong with dreams bigger than his slight frame suggested. He'd already caused controversy at the Long Beach International Karate Championships with his lightning-fast demonstrations, but Hollywood remained skeptical. Kung Fu? That's just dance moves and movie tricks, the producers would say, lighting their cigars and dismissing centuries of Chinese martial arts tradition with a wave of their hands. Bruce had opened a martial arts school in Oakland, teaching anyone willing to learn. Black, white, Asian, it didn't matter. This itself was revolutionary. Traditional Chinese martial arts masters refused to teach non-Chinese students. Bruce broke that barrier, believing martial arts belonged to anyone dedicated enough to master them. But this openness came with consequences. The challenge. The demonstration hall on that October afternoon was packed with over 200 people. Bruce had been invited to showcase his skills to potential investors for a TV series concept called The Warrior, a show about a Shaolin monk in the American Old West. Everything was going perfectly. Bruce demonstrated his 1-inch punch, sending a muscular volunteer stumbling backward despite Bruce barely moving his fist. He performed his 2-finger push-ups, his body rigid as an iron bar. The crowd murmured with appreciation. That's when Carl Morrison stood up from the back row. Morrison was a former boxer who'd been banned from professional fighting for excessive brutality. He'd hospitalized 3 opponents and showed no remorse. Now he made money as an enforcer for illegal gambling operations, and his reputation as an unbeatable street fighter had grown to mythic proportions. "This is all performance art," Morrison announced loudly, his voice cutting through the applause. "Real fighting isn't about fancy moves and philosophy. It's about size, strength, and violence." That little Chinese guy wouldn't last 10 seconds against a real fighter. The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at Bruce. The demonstration organizer, Master William Chun, quickly stepped forward. "Mr. Morrison, this is a demonstration of technique, not a challenge match." "I'll take his challenge," Bruce interrupted calmly, his accented English clear and confident. "But only if he agrees to full contact. No rules, no stopping until one of us submits." Morrison's laugh boomed through the hall. "You serious, little man? I got 100 pounds on you. I'll break you in half." Bruce's expression never changed. "Then you have nothing to fear." The first exchange, humiliation. The crowd quickly cleared a space in the center of the demonstration hall. There was no ring, no referee, no safety equipment. Just polished wood floor and 2 men with completely different approaches to combat. Bruce assumed his famous stance, sideways, hands up, bouncing lightly on his feet like a cobra ready to strike. Morrison simply walked straight toward him, his massive arms hanging loose, completely relaxed. He wasn't even in a fighting stance. To him, this wasn't a fight. It was pest control. "Come on, little Bruce," Morrison taunted. "Show me that fancy kung fu." Bruce struck first, a lightning fast kick toward Morrison's knee. But Morrison's hand shot down with surprising speed for a big man, slapping the kick aside like someone swatting a mosquito. Bruce tried again, throwing a combination left jab, right cross, spinning back kick. Morrison blocked the punches with his massive forearms and simply stepped back from the kick, barely moving. Then Morrison smiled. And that's when everything changed. The grab. Morrison's huge hand shot out faster than anyone expected, grabbing Bruce by the shoulder. His grip was like a steel trap, his fingers digging into Bruce's muscle. "Got you," Morrison growled. In one motion, he lifted Bruce completely off the ground, all 140 pounds of him, and threw him across the demonstration floor like a rag doll. Bruce's body hit the polished wood hard, sliding several feet before he rolled to absorb the impact. Gasps filled the room. Several people stood up, ready to stop the fight. But Bruce was already on his feet, his face showing no pain, only intense focus. "Lucky grab," Bruce said quietly. Morrison laughed again. "Luck? That wasn't luck, little man. That's what happens when a real fighter faces a dancer." He cracked his knuckles again and started walking toward Bruce, slower this time, like a cat playing with a mouse before the kill. The second humiliation. Bruce tried a different approach. He faked high, then dropped low, attempting a leg sweep to take Morrison's massive legs out from under him. But Morrison had been in too many street fights to fall for basic tricks. He simply lifted his leg, letting Bruce's sweep pass harmlessly underneath, then brought his foot down in a crushing stomp aimed at Bruce's ribs. Bruce barely rolled away in time, the stomp missing him by inches and creating a loud boom against the wooden floor that made the whole room shake. Morrison followed up immediately, unleashing a straight punch that would have knocked out a bull. Bruce tried to slip it, but Morrison had been setting him up. The giant's other hand came from nowhere, grabbing Bruce's arm mid-movement. This time Morrison didn't throw him. He held Bruce's arm extended, squeezing with crushing force. "You feel that, little man?" Morrison's voice was cold now, the playfulness gone. "That's real power. All your speed don't mean nothing if I can catch you. And I always catch them." Bruce's face showed strain for the first time. He tried to twist free, tried to strike with his free hand, but Morrison's grip was absolute. The big man was proving his point, that size and strength could overcome speed and technique. The crowd turns. The whispers started spreading through the audience. "Maybe Morrison is right. Bruce is too small. This is dangerous, someone should stop it." Even Master Chun looked worried, stepping closer to the action, ready to intervene. One of the Hollywood producers who'd come to see Bruce perform shook his head and started gathering his things. "Waste of time," he muttered to his assistant. "The Chinese kid's got heart, but that's not enough for television." Morrison heard the whispers and smiled wider. He was winning not just the fight, but the entire room. He was destroying Bruce's reputation with every passing second. "Last chance to quit, little man," Morrison said, still holding Bruce's arm in that crushing grip. "Admit that kung fu is worthless and I'll let you go. Otherwise, I'm gonna break this arm and teach you a lesson about respecting real fighters." The room held its breath. Bruce's response was almost too quiet to hear. "In kung fu, we learn that water defeats the rock not by strength, but by persistence and adaptability." Morrison's laugh was harsh. "What's that supposed to?" He never finished the sentence. The 7 seconds that changed everything. What happened next happened so fast that most people in the room couldn't process it until they saw it replayed later on film. Thank goodness someone had brought a camera to document Bruce's demonstration. Second 1, Bruce stopped resisting Morrison's grip. Instead of pulling away, he moved toward the giant, stepping inside Morrison's reach where those massive arms became a disadvantage. Second 2, Bruce's free hand shot up in a precise strike to Morrison's elbow joint. Not to break it, but to trigger a nerve cluster that momentarily weakened Morrison's grip. Second 3, the instant Morrison's grip loosened by even a fraction, Bruce's arm twisted in a corkscrew motion, a technique from Wing Chun that created leverage impossible for even Morrison's strength to counter. Second 4, free now, Bruce's body moved like liquid lightning. His palm struck Morrison's chest, not hard, not obviously powerful, but placed with surgical precision over the solar plexus. Second 5, Morrison's eyes went wide. The breath exploded from his lungs. His massive body, which had seemed immovable, suddenly rocked backward. Second 6 Bruce followed instantly with a sweeping leg technique, but this time he didn't try to sweep Morrison's planted leg. He swept the leg that Morrison had just shifted his weight onto, catching the giant mid-transition. Second 7 all 285 pounds of Carl. The mountain Morrison crashed to the ground with a thunderous boom that shook the entire demonstration hall. Complete silence fell. The impossible made real. Morrison lay on his back, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, trying desperately to get air back into his lungs. The solar plexus strike had temporarily paralyzed his diaphragm. Bruce stood over him, not celebrating, not taunting, just standing there calmly, breathing normally, as if he just finished a light warm-up exercise. "The power," Bruce said quietly, his voice now carrying through the silent room, "doesn't come from muscle size. It comes from understanding energy, timing, and the human body's vulnerabilities." He extended his hand to Morrison. The giant stared at that hand for a long moment, his face showing something no one in that room had ever seen before: genuine shock and respect. Morrison took the hand and Bruce helped him up, though of course Morrison did most of the actual lifting with his own massive legs. But the gesture meant everything. The aftermath. The room exploded into applause and excited conversation. People were standing, pointing, trying to explain to each other what they just witnessed. Master Chun was beaming with pride. That is why Bruce Lee is special. He doesn't just know techniques, he understands the principles behind them. The Hollywood producer who'd been leaving stopped at the door, turned around and came back. "I need to talk to you about that TV show," he said to Bruce, though his voice carried disappointment that would later prove significant. But Bruce wasn't paying attention to any of them. He was still facing Morrison, who had finally caught his breath. "How?" Morrison asked simply. "I've fought hundreds of men. Size always wins. Always. But you're half my size and you put me down like I was nothing." Bruce's answer would become one of his most famous quotes. "I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times. You relied on your natural gifts, size and strength. I relied on principles tested over thousands of years and practiced until they became instinct." What really happened that day? That demonstration in 1964 became legendary, but not in the way Bruce Lee hoped. The TV show The Warrior was eventually made, but not with Bruce in the lead role. The producers gave the part to David Carradine, a white actor, because they decided American audiences weren't ready for an Asian leading man. That betrayal led Bruce to return to Hong Kong, where he made the films that would eventually make him a global icon. The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, Way of the Dragon, and finally Enter the Dragon transformed martial arts cinema forever. But the lesson from that 7-second exchange with Carl Morrison went deeper than Hollywood politics. The real victory. 3 months after the demonstration, Carl Morrison showed up at Bruce's martial arts school in Oakland. He stood in the doorway, looking uncertain for the first time in his life. "I want to learn," he said simply. Bruce smiled. "Then come in. No man is too big or too small to become a student." Morrison became one of Bruce's most dedicated students, eventually opening his own martial arts school that specialized in teaching self-defense to people who thought they were too big or too small to fight effectively. Years later, Morrison would tell reporters, "Bruce didn't just beat me that day. He freed me. I'd been a slave to my size my whole life, using it to hurt people because I thought that's all I was good for. He showed me that true power comes from discipline, not dominance." The universal lesson. Bruce Lee's philosophy wasn't just about fighting. It was about life. "Be like water," he would say. "Water can flow or it can crash. Be formless, shapeless like water. Put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. Put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. Put water into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Water can flow or it can crash." This philosophy applies to everything. In your career, don't rely on a single strength. Adapt to challenges like water finding its path. In relationships, don't be rigid. Flow with circumstances while maintaining your essential nature. In learning, don't just memorize techniques. Understand principles that can be applied to any situation. The demonstration hall fight taught that size doesn't determine destiny. Morrison was bigger, stronger, and more experienced in street fighting. But Bruce had something more important. understanding, precision, and years of deliberate practice. The final wisdom. Bruce Lee died tragically young in 1973, just 32 years old. But his philosophy outlived him because it spoke to a universal truth. Anyone can overcome limitations through dedication, understanding, and the courage to challenge conventional thinking. That 7-foot giant learned humility from a man barely 5 feet 7 inches. The lesson wasn't that size doesn't matter. It does. But it's not the only thing that matters, and it's certainly not the most important thing. The most important thing is this. Know yourself, understand your opponent, and never stop learning. Morrison summed it up best years later. Bruce didn't win because he was better than me. He won because he understood the fight better than me. And that understanding came from thousands of hours of practice, study, and a willingness to question everything he'd been taught until he found what actually worked. Closing call to action. If this story inspired you to look beyond size, strength, or conventional limitations, to see that understanding and dedication can overcome almost any obstacle, then smash that like button and subscribe to our channel. Share in the comments. Have you ever seen someone overcome incredible odds through skill and intelligence rather than raw power? Your story might inspire our next video. And here's a question for the true martial arts fans. At exactly what second did Bruce shift from defense to offense? Watch the fight sequence again and tell us in the comments. Remember, knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do. Bruce Lee. Stay inspired, stay humble, and never stop learning. See you in the next story.